And the recurring theme that I kept hearing is that someone needs to look at the books. Someone needs to look at the books. But it's my understanding that BFM, DLA, OSA, LRC, even this committee, and the entire ACFR process, they're all in place to look at the books. So the opportunity that I've identified is that nobody's looking at the bookkeepers.
Welcome to Searchlight Report, a weekly podcast from South Dakota Searchlight. I'm Megan O'Brien. Our new podcast will bring you up to date on politics and policy in the Mount Rushmore state. You just heard from Missy Locke, who's a compliance auditor for the state. She started looking at bookkeeping processes and other financial practices last year. The legislature created her position after a string of criminal cases against state employees. One is serving a 7-year sentence for the theft of $1.8 million from the State Department of Social Services. Locke is trying to prevent something like that from happening again.
We want to be sure that the people who actually have access to our state funds are continuously monitored.
Locke spoke to the legislature's budget committee at the Capitol in Pierre during the first week of the 3-month legislative session. It was a week packed with activity. The governor delivered his State of the State speech and asked lawmakers to stop abortion pills from coming into the state, promoted his property tax reduction plan, and announced a new economic development focus. And lawmakers got started debating a wide variety of bills. A day before the session kicked off, dozens of lawmakers, farmers, and ranchers gathered at the state capitol's rotunda to rally for property rights. Amanda Radke of Mitchell emceed the event.
In our fight for property rights in the state of South Dakota, we have faced some of the worst of the worst. We've achieved a lot of victories along the way as well, and we're going to talk about those victories today. But one of the greatest blessings of it all, through all the hardships, is meeting people like you.
It's the 4th year of the rally. A coalition of lawmakers passed a law last year that banned eminent domain for carbon capture pipelines in the state. That means companies who want to use private property for those pipelines can't force landowners to give them access. At this year's rally, Senator Mark Lapke, a Republican from Leola, announced 2 new pieces of property rights legislation.
What I'm here to announce today is a constitutional amendment that is farther going to enshrine property rights within our Constitution, because the only reason that we're still standing here today and accomplish what we have is that we fell back on that Constitution. That is the absolute backbone of our country, of our state. And so while 1052 was a good start last year, codified law is too easily amendable over time, too vulnerable over time. But it's those constitutionally protected rights that hold firm forever. And so what I'm here to announce for today is that I will be bringing in a constitutional amendment via the Senate, along with Representative Spencer Gosh in the House, that is effectively going to eliminate eminent domain for private gain in the state of South Dakota from today and for the rest of eternity.
Lapke also said he'll introduce a bill to protect landowners from aggressive tactics by land agents. He's naming it for Jared Bosley, who alleges pipeline land agents trespassed on his property.
So what I'll be doing is I'll be bringing a bill that I've affectionately coined the Bosley Bill that is going to clean up that language and mirror a unanimous Supreme Court decision so that nothing like that ever happens to another South Dakotan again.
Reporting by South Dakota Searchlight's Joshua Heyer spurred a bill that would make state employees wait longer before working with companies that do business with the state. Steve Westra worked as the commissioner of the governor's Office of Economic Development under former Governor Kristi Noem. He left the post in 2023, but not before pledging the first of what would ultimately grow to $69 million worth of aid benefiting C.J. Schwans. The company is building a food production plant north of Sioux Falls that will employ 650 people. A year after leaving state government, Westra took a job with C.J. Schwann's. The company says it did not discuss potential employment with Westra while he was involved with the state government. But Tim Reed, a Republican senator from Brookings, worries the career moves were too close to one another. In response to Hires reporting, Reed introduced legislation that would require state employees to wait 2 years before taking a job with the company, if the company and the employees were involved in a contract worth more than $1 million. I'll be back with more news after this break.
This is Seth Tupper, editor of South Dakota Searchlight. We launched Searchlight in 2022. We shine a light on the most pressing issues in the Mount Rushmore state, focusing on state policy and politics. Our reach goes from East River to West River, with journalists in Sioux Falls, Pierre, and Rapid City. You can subscribe to our work by going to southdakota.searchlight.com/subscribe.
Another economic development bill would take sole control of the Future Fund away from the governor. That's from Republican Senator Taffy Howard of Rapid City. The Future Fund gets money from a fee assessed on employers. The money is supposed to be used for research and economic development. Former Governor Kristi Noem angered some lawmakers when she used the fund for a rodeo, a shooting range that lawmakers refused to pay for, and ads starring herself. Howard wants the state's Economic Development Board to review applications and set rules for grants and loans from the fund.
Under current law, millions of dollars can be committed without mandatory board approval, without a standardized application process, without objective economic impact criteria, and without consistent public reporting. This is not conservative governance. It's simply an oversight failure. And we have seen the consequences through the years. You can agree or disagree, but the fund has paid for some entertainment events, large-scale advertising campaigns, politically adjacent promotional spending that are sometimes difficult for some folks to reconcile with statutory language that is focused on research and workforce development. In at least one case, money from the fund was used to finance a project after the legislature explicitly declined to fund it through the regular budget process. Supporters point to individual projects that they like, but good government is not measured by anecdotes. A system that is built on discretion instead of rules is a bad system, regardless of who controls it.
A legislative committee deadlocked on Howard's bill 4-4 with one member absent. The committee plans to take up the bill again later. Meanwhile, the day before the committee hearing, Governor Larry Roden tried to get in front of the issue. He signed an executive order listing his self-imposed guardrails for the Future Fund.
In my view, the executive order, I think is just to put in writing and give the legislators a comfort level. This is what we're looking at when we're making these decisions on Future Fund projects.
Back in December, a nonprofit group based in New York started putting up signage at gas stations across South Dakota. The placards asked viewers, pregnant, don't want to be, and provided a link to more information. South Dakota Republican Attorney General Marty Jackley sent the group a cease and desist. He said the ads mislead people to believe it's legal to bring abortion pills into the state. The group, Mayday Health, said it's exercising its right to free speech. There are now 2 lawsuits. Attorney General Jackley is asking a state judge to put a stop to the advertisements at gas stations, and Mayday is asking a federal judge to prevent Jackley from doing that. Mayday leader Liv Reisner explained the group's position last month in a social media video.
We're not taking the signs down. We don't sell pills. We don't ship pills. Pregnant, don't want to be, visit mayday.health. That's just information. It's First Amendment protected free speech, and information is not illegal. Here's why their attempt to silence us is not going to work. It's because people have already tried and they've failed. We put up billboards in Jackson, Mississippi that said pregnant, don't want to be. And the Attorney General sent me a subpoena, which is framed in my apartment. And we responded then and we said no. We are just spreading First Amendment protected free speech. We're not taking our signs down. And then we put up 20 more billboards, ran a statewide television ad, and never heard back from them.
There could also be legislation on the issue, Governor Larry Roden said in his State of the State speech.
South Dakota is the most pro-life state in America, and we will keep it that way. The biggest threat to unborn lives is abortion pills being illegally mailed into our state. Abortion pills cause a higher rate of medical complications for women. That's a fact. More than that, they end the life of an unborn child. I've worked on this issue for over 20 years. Back in my freshman term in the legislature, I was a prime sponsor on a House concurrent resolution urging the FDA to reconsider its approval of drugs that kill babies.
Roden didn't give details, but said a bill is forthcoming.
This session, I'll be working with legislators and the Attorney General on legislation to stop abortion pills from coming into South Dakota. And I hope that legislation reaches my desk.
South Dakota has one of the most restrictive abortion bans in the country. The only exception is when the mother's life is threatened by a pregnancy.
State government plays a huge role in our lives. But sometimes with our busy schedules, it can be hard to keep up with the flood of news. Our evening wrap newsletter from State's Newsroom summarizes the day's top stories happening across the country's state capitals. You can sign up by going to statesnewsroom.com/subscribe.
Finally, some sad news. Don Barnett, the former mayor of Rapid City, died recently at age 83. Barnett pulled off one of the more surprising wins in South Dakota political history in 1971. He was only 28 years old and a Democrat in a Republican city when he was elected mayor. In June 1972, a massive flood on Rapid Creek killed 238 people. Barnett led the recovery and helped make sure the city never again overbuilt in the floodplain. Barnett spoke to Searchlight's Seth Tupper several years ago for a documentary Seth produced for South Dakota Public Broadcasting. In this clip, Barnett recalls a meeting with federal relief workers who wanted to rebuild temporary housing in the floodplain.
Leonard Swanson had been with the city since 1947, and he was public works director. He said, no, just real sharp like that. And he said, the council and the city cannot permit the reoccupation of the floodplain because that would endanger so many lives. And he said we should never sentence, like a judge would sentence you to the gallows, we should never sentence the flood survivors to one more night on the suicidal floodplain. And Kay was there, my administrative assistant, and she wrote that down, and then I repeated it, and then she repeated it, and Swanee broke down in tears, and Dr. Lytle was president of the city council and deputy mayor, and he said, I think Swanee's right. We should not permit the federals to repair those mobile home parks. Maybe nobody should repair their homes near the creek. So he made a motion, and lo and behold, all 10 councilmen adopted that policy. We did not buy all of the land near the creek, but we certainly purchased all of the residential land by the creek and then had a relocation program when the HUD people out of Denver granted Rapid City $48 million, and we used that to buy the places where 1,500 families had lived, and we converted that to an open space park that's 5 miles long and 5 blocks wide all the way through town. Now, when we have high water again in Rapid City, those parks will be damaged, but they won't be damaged to the tune of 700 destroyed mobile homes and over 1,000 wooden homes, because now it's a golf course, about 18 miles of hiking trails and biking trails and soccer fields and so many recreational things, and that floodplain park makes Rapid City one of the most beautiful cities in America.
That's all for this week. Searchlight Report is based on the reporting of South Dakota Searchlight's staff, editor Seth Tupper, senior reporter John Holt, and reporters Joshua Heyer, Mackenzie Huber, and me. I write the script and do the audio production for the show with editing by Seth Tupper. Audio comes from recordings by South Dakota Searchlight and from legislative live streams provided by South Dakota Public Broadcasting. South Dakota Searchlight is part of States Newsroom, the nation's largest nonprofit news organization. Until next time, I'm South Dakota Searchlight's Megan O'Brien with the Searchlight Report.